In this video, we want to talk about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because a lot of people who don't seem to know really who is this Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I mean, even myself, when I was a teenager, I didn't know anything about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I was very surprised when people started, when I heard that Muslims have a prophet. His name is Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I decided I wanted to know about this person. And there's a lot of wrong ideas said about him, so I thought we could do this video just to know a little bit about him for people who don't know or want to know more. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born in 570 before Christ. He was born in the Western Arabia, in Mecca. This is in Saudi Arabia, in a mountain town. And the date of his birth was Monday, the 12th of Rabi'a al-Awwal. This is in the Islamic Hijri calendar. I don't know the month in the Gregorian calendar, but this is from the Arab calendar. And between him and Jesus, there was 457 years. So in Islam, he is the last prophet, and between him and Jesus, who came before him, there was 457 years. And he was the first and only son of Abdullah ibn al-Muttalib and Amina bint Wahab. He was born from Bani Hashim, from the Qurayshi tribe. And his grandfather was Abdul Muttalib, who looked after him when he was orphaned, and then he was looked after by his uncle Abu Talib. And his family were a righteous family. They were well-known and respected family in Mecca, and they were descendants of Prophet Ibrahim from Ismail. Because we're told that Ibrahim had two wives. He married Sarah, and she gave birth to Isaac. And he married Hajar, and before Sarah had her child, he had his first child, who was Ismail. So we're told that Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, is from those descendants, and his family were a righteous family, and his grandfather had a high respectable position in the clan and was protecting the Kaaba. So regarding his name, many people nowadays called Muhammad. It's a very common name, and even people, they joke and they say that if you want to call a Muslim and you don't know their name, just call Muhammad and he'll probably turn around. So, but in that time, the name Muhammad was not common. In fact, it was not really used very much, but his grandfather decided to give him this name. So he was known as Muhammad, which means to praise or to glorify, and the name was not used that much at that time. And he also had other names he was known by, for example, Ahmed, which had a similar meaning, to praise and glorify. And he was known as Mustafa. I guess this was after his prophethood, meaning the chosen one. And he had other names referred to, for example, Abu Qasim, because he had a son who passed away, and the Arabs used to call themselves as the father of a certain child. So he had certain other names, but the main name he was known by is Muhammad. And he was orphaned when he was a child. Before he was born, his father died, and when he was 6 years old, his mother died. And then he was looked after by several wet nurses who fed him, and he was taken up into the mountains at times, where he stayed for a few years. And he was brought up by his grandfather Abdul Muttalib until he passed away, and then by his uncle Abu Talib, who looked after him as like a son. So he was orphaned, and many people, they think that orphaned people can't really be anything in society, and they have a very low position. But he Muslims believe he was looked after by God, by Allah, and also he had other people to look after him. So there was this gets rid of some of the stigma of orphans, and perhaps it made him more understanding and more humble, because in Islam orphans have a special place and they're very protected, and the Quran tells people to look after the orphans, and God is with orphan people because they need more protection at times. And regarding education, there are some stories about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Some Christian people and others, they claim that he was taught by Christian people or Jewish people, and from this he learned about Christianity and Judaism, and he was very, very educated. But in reality, he, as were many people in that time, he was illiterate. And not only he, but many of the Arabs at that time were illiterate, and they could not read or write. And he had not studied for any profession. He worked as a shepherd for some time and as a trader. So he was not educated in this way. So as we just were saying, he worked as a shepherd when he was a young man, and this was actually the work of many of the prophets, peace be upon them. We are told that most of the prophets, peace be upon them, worked as shepherds because it helped them to learn patience and how to lead animals, which is easier than leading people. So it gave them practice before they have to help people to be guided. And from this kind of work you can learn patience, because the sheep will want to go all over the place. And then after that he worked as a merchant selling things with his uncle, and he traveled to different towns, and he became known as a righteous person and a good seller, very honest and upright, and people trusted him. And in the end he began to work for a wealthy businesswoman called Khadijah, who he eventually married. So this marriage took place when he was 25 years old, and at that time, in that society, that was considered old. Most people were getting married when they reached puberty or something. But he reached 25 and he'd not married yet. And this was not like most men of his time, because he wasn't going after women, and he was not joining in the places like nightclubs, or because they had those kind of things in that time, not like nowadays of course, but people would go to a place and they would drink and they would have women dancing and different things. He did not join in with these kind of things. And Khadijah, when she heard about the character of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, from one of the people who was working with her, she asked him about his character, and he told her how honest he was and how good he was with dealing with people, and he was a good seller. And he also mentioned some strange things, like he said he saw there was a cloud above his head as if it was protecting him from the sun. So he saw something strange about him, something a bit different, and he was a very honest person. He was known in this society as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. And Khadijah herself, she was known as the pure one, because she kept herself, and she was a very righteous person and good person. And actually she'd received a lot of proposals from men and turned them down. When she she sent the proposal to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, through her friend, to ask him why he had not got married until that time, and if he would accept to marry a righteous woman from the Quraysh tribe. And he accepted. And Khadijah at that time was 40 years old, and she'd been widowed. She was widowed about 3 times, and she'd had children from previous marriages. So from this perspective, maybe some people will think that this kind of person was not suitable for that person. But if you look, they were united because of their characters and because of their positions. They were both well known as respectable people, and probably they had a similar way of thinking, similar values. For this reason, their marriage seemed to be a very happy marriage. There didn't seem to be much conflict, or I've never seen anything written that there was arguments or disagreements. People think that if you marry people the same age, they will get on, but it's not about age really. It's about people's values and about who they are. So this meant that this woman maybe was a suitable person, and she was dedicated to him throughout her life. Like they were like friends or something. She supported him with her wealth and with herself, even after he became a prophet. And she was the only one who bore him children as well. And he had 6 children with Khadijah, and out of these children, 4 of them were daughters, Zainab, Kulthum, Rawaya and Fatima, and he had 2 sons who died in infancy. So we can see from this that she seemed to be his real and true wife. And I find this interesting in some way, because nowadays you find many men, they insist, not really men, but many society tries to tell people that men should be a lot older than their wives, and they say that women will not have children over a certain age. For example, they'll say 40 or even 35 sometimes. But we find in Khadijah, she was over 40. She was 40 when she got married. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he did not say anything about this age, and she went on to have children with him. And he remained dedicated to her throughout the time he was with her. He did not take another wife, and he did not think about other women. And we can see that, he, even when she had passed away, he remembered her to his other wives who were even younger, that, this woman, she was the one who was by him all the time, and you could not find a better wife than this person. So he had this character that you don't find really amongst many people, that they actually recognize more than who someone is and who really deserves the respect. They look past these superficial things, for example, the age of this person, that they were a widow or something like that. Their love was based on a true love from themselves. That's why their story makes a very nice story. And about his daughters, the Arabs used to not appreciate daughters, and they would bury them alive. And it's interesting here that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he had 4 daughters, and he loved his daughters and supported them to adulthood and found husbands for them. He was very close to Fatima especially, and it's said that Fatima was similar to him. She used to walk like him and had the same mannerisms as him, and it's even said that he used to stand up for her when she entered and put her in his place. And he encouraged people to be good to daughters. So he was against the killing of daughters that people used to do in that time. I think they used to bury them alive because they were afraid of poverty, because usually girls are not the ones who bring in money. They thought that having a daughter would make them more poor, and having a son would help them to be more rich. And Islam was against this killing of daughters. And that's interesting because people often accuse Muslims and Islam of oppressing women, but actually, this is one of the ways that Islam tried to protect women and brought them rights. I mean, the biggest right is bringing someone the right to live, and they did not all the time have that right. So this was something special about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that he gave this example that he had daughters and he supported them all. So people who all the time prefer sons, they should look at these things as well. And another example he left for people, and we can see from his character and behavior, is that he used to make peace, and he was trusted by the different tribes where he was. He had a good position, and as we said, he was known as the trustworthy one, Al-Amin. And one example of this was when he was 35 years old, he was called to make peace among the tribes in Mecca. They wanted to reset the black house in Mecca, and each tribe wanted the honor to put the black stone there. So there was going to be a war if the tribes were not able to agree who was going to do it. There was going to break a war out because the people in that time used to make wars for small things. So they said to each other that they would ask the advice of the next person who came. And who was the next person who came? They say the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so when they saw him, they said, this is Al-Amin, and they felt that this was a suitable person to ask because he was a trustworthy one. And they asked his advice. So he told them to put a black robe on the ground and to take the black stone and put it in the middle. Then he told one person from each tribe to carry the robe and put the stone in its place. So this prevented a war, and all of the tribes felt that they'd been able to do it. So this was a way of making peace, and it showed he was intelligent and able to find suitable solutions to these kind of problems and make peace with people. He was not someone who wanted to make wars with people, and he wanted to encourage peace, and this is one example of that. So we mentioned several times that he was known as the trustworthy one, and this is why Khadijah proposed marriage to him, because of his trustworthy status, his integrity, and good treatment of people. So trustworthy one in Arabic means Al-Amin, and this is why as well the different tribes trusted him to deal with the situations and disagreements amongst them. He was never known to lie or cheat people or be dishonest, and people could trust him. So it makes sense that if someone was going to be a prophet, they should be trustworthy. No one could really accept the message from someone who is known to be a liar and is all the time making up stories. And at the same time, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he was not really happy with the things that are going on in this society. There was a lot of oppression. I mean, as we mentioned, they killed their children sometimes. They buried female girls alive. They worshipped statues, and they inherited women. They also used to drink alcohol a lot, and there was a lot of oppressive things going on and things not really right. And he would go to the Mount Hira to sit alone, meditate, and think of solutions to the problems in society. And people, you'll find in some books written by Orientalists and so forth, sometimes they'll claim that he hallucinated or went into a trance because he was meditating. But the thing is, we will explain this, but he was not known at all in that time to have any illness or epilepsy or hallucinations. And there was no one in that time who claimed that he had such things as well. He continued to retreat to the mountains until he was 40 years old. And at that time, when he was about 40, he was meditating one day when he says he saw something that had wings and covered the sky, and everywhere he looked, he saw him. I mean, this is a narration. We're told that he told his wife and probably many of the companions. And so this is an explanation that he has explained. He was told to read, and he replied that he could not read, as he was an illiterate Arab. And then he was told again to read, and he replied that he could not. So then he was asked again, and then the angel hugged him, and he started to read. The first words that were revealed at that time was, "Read in the name of your Lord." So this was like a miracle. And also there's another issue here. For example, why did the angel hug him? And this question I had when I learned about this incident. I was wondering, why did the angel hug him? It seems kind of strange that someone would ask someone to read something and then go and hug them. So the reply that I got was that the angel hugged him to demonstrate that this was not a dream or a hallucination as he may think. I mean, in some books by Orientalists, they say that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he thought that he saw an angel, but he didn't see an angel. He was hallucinating or a dream. And they say even that after some time, he started to wonder if he was a prophet or not, and he got confused. Did he really see something or not? These are all incorrect explanations. I don't know where they got this information from, but from what we are told, that this angel hugged him to demonstrate to him that it was not a dream and not a hallucination. He was really there physically and not just an image. Because our eyes may deceive us at times, but when we feel something, we really feel it. You can't really imagine someone hugging you, really. When you feel something touch you or hug you, there is something there. But I mean, at times, maybe we can imagine something, or we think we see something, or we go into a dreamy state. So then we can't really be sure. But when something touches us or you feel it, you know that this is really there. So we're told that this was something as well, because God knew that in the future people would accuse him of imagining everything and hallucinating. So the hug was to show how real it was. And then when people hear that he was hugged as well, they're more likely to accept. So after this incident, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was afraid and he went straight home to his wife and asked her to cover him. And he told her everything. And she reassured him that he was good to the poor, to the widows and relatives, so God would not abandon him. And she took him to her Christian cousin. So her Christian cousin, his name was Nofel, he was someone who studied the Bible. And some of the people at that time who studied the Bible, and even the Jewish people at that time, they studied the Torah too. And there were many people who said there were signs that a prophet, peace be upon him, was going to come. And it said that many of the Jewish people thought that he would come from them. For this reason, they didn't accept him when he came from the Arabs. And at the same time, some of the Christians saw, they said there's going to be a prophet, peace be upon him, coming. So this person, Nofel, said he'd been studying the Bible, and some of them, they were waiting for this person. So he said he'd seen the attributes and what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, described from what he knew of the Bible and Revelations was like the same being that had appeared to the prophets before him. So he was visited from the angel who brought the revelations to the prophet before him, the angel Jibreel. And he actually said he wanted to follow him, but he didn't live long enough to do so. So, if someone's going to make up a revelation, firstly, would they be known as a very honest person? And secondly, he had to wait for this revelation to come again. For another 40 days, there was no revelation, and he had no idea when it would come, and he had no control over it when it would come or what it would say. And this is an evidence as well that it was not coming from him, because if something comes from someone, whenever they want to do something, it will come to them at that time. But we find that many times, he had to wait, for example, 40 days, 15 days sometimes, and, he was waiting for an answer to something or other. And at times, the revelation would come and, it would be different to what he wanted or thought. So, because he didn't have control of it, and it was not saying his ideas, then, this is an evidence that it was not actually from him. And the other issue is that if someone was hallucinating or they gone crazy, I mean, I've never heard or seen any crazy or sick person come out with a whole religion or a whole book telling people how to live, in a very logical, rational way. I mean, obviously, in this video, it's too much to go over all of this right now, but if someone looks into it, I mean, how can they be accused of being crazy when they come out with a whole religion that's, like a guidance for life? So the first believer was Khadijah, his wife and companion, and she was the first to accept Islam and the first believer. And then after that, his best friend Abu Bakr accepted straight away, and because he said he knew of his honesty, he did not doubt he was lying. And then his cousin Ali, who was only 10 years old at that time, but he accepted as well. And the thing is, if people say that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was ill, he was hallucinating, even people who are close, for example, Khadijah or his best friend, normally people, they would notice that this person is not like themselves. They've gone into a delusional state. They will not just follow them. People don't do that. I mean, for example, if someone's husband becomes sick and they develop schizophrenia, normally their wife would not just go along with what they're saying and believe them. Maybe they would contact a doctor, maybe they would deal with them in that way, and they would tell people that they've become sick, even if they humored them to their face. They would not support untruths. But the closest people to someone, they're the ones who know them really. So Khadija, she saw that this was really how it was, and she knew his character, and she knew he was not crazy person. Otherwise, she would not have accepted herself in the beginning straight away. And the same thing as his best friend. They could see the rationality in this. It was not, a crazy person hallucinating. And the first teachings that were being taught was the belief that all the religions, of the past, for example, Christianity and Judaism, all of them were based upon the teachings that there is no God but Allah and there's nothing like him, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. So why do Muslims love and believe the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? In general, there's many reasons, but some of the reasons were he was known to be honest and trustworthy, and also gentle and kind, and he cared about his followers, and he treated people like he was their father. And we're told in the Quran that he's like their father, and his wives are like their mothers. And he was an excellent example. I mean, he practiced what he preached, and he showed people in his life how to follow Quran, and he gave his life and time to teach, and he got rid of a lot of oppression and encouraged love, forgiveness, and peace. And his character and teachings were like the prophets before him, peace be upon him.